Hello one and all, and welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program adventure. And in today's Kerbal Space Program adventure, we will once again be adventuring to the watery world of Laythe, Jules' pearly blue moon, where over the past couple of weeks we have been steadily establishing a small colony. In our story so far, we have sent a scout quadcopter to survey the moon's landscape, air and sea. We've established a giant space station in close equatorial orbit to Laythe, and we have deployed a submersible laboratory and habitat to the oceans. But now, we need to get some Kerbal boots on the lands of Laythe. Now, while we could kindly ask our ocean-bound Kerbals to go for a short 20 or so kilometre swim to the nearest island, I am a benevolent overlord, and instead will gift the Kerbals the latest and greatest in Lowne aerospace aircraft technology, a flying laboratory. This state-of-the-art vehicle will be capable of both land and sea landings in both the conventional sense of the word and also vertically, like a helicopter, a VTOL, if you will, which of course stands for vertical takeoff and landing. I decided a VTOL would be the most useful form of aircraft to send to Laythe, as it can have the speed of an airplane, but the versatility of a helicopter. The until now uninhabited Laythe doesn't have any runways or much flat land at all for that matter, so having a vertical takeoff and landing system means that we can touch down anywhere regardless of how treacherous the terrain may be. It also allows us to have slightly more control over where we land, and we will come to an immediate stop upon touchdown, and we won't, roll for an indeterminate distance as we apply the brakes, as what happens when you land the conventional way. And so, as you can see, construction is well underway. You may have noticed the very high battery capacity of this thing, and that's because this vehicle is purely electric, meaning that it has infinite range, does not require refueling, since its RTGs can continuously resupply the craft with power. Of course, we will still have to land intermittently to allow the RTGs to recharge the batteries, but this is still much faster than needing to mine and refine ore, and of course, it'll work when splashed down in the ocean, where drilling for ore is of course not possible. This vehicle is therefore able to visit any point on Laythe, land or sea, without issues, and so I've made sure it's armed with every available science unit in order to make the most of this ability. For the VTOL system itself, I tried a few different systems before I settled on this Tiltwing mechanism. You can see me in the middle of construction of here. Logic would dictate that rotation servers are the way to go for rotating engine mounts, but they are just so temperamental and glitchy and a nightmare to program, and then they break for no reason and stop responding to commands midway through a mission. Honestly, I love the robotic parts in this game, but they are still so buggy that I rarely use them on crafts. I wanted to try and minimize any and all risk of Kraken attacks or robotic pieces bugging out, and so for that reason I wanted to try and keep the number of moving parts on this thing as low as possible. I wanted the entire mechanism really to be operated by one robotic part only. With this precedent set, I went with this alligator hinge setup where the wings of the aircraft are mounted above the fuselage and the entire thing can tilt between 0 and 90 degrees via that crocodile hinge there. I have a small junior docking port on the posterior edge of the wing, which you may have noticed, which will keep the wings locked in a horizontal position during flight. I found that flying faster than 100 meters per second would result in the alligator hinge becoming a bit floppy, and the wings and engines would just flap around and result in loss of aircraft control and, ultimately, rapid unplanned disassembly. A docking port to lock the vertical orientation isn't necessary, since vertical flight is much slower and the alligator hinge can easily hold on its own. So that's the reason why we've only got that docking port there to hold the wings in a horizontal point. Unlike our previous trips to Laythe, our interplanetary transfer stage isn't going to be powered by nuclear engines. Oh, I really thought, just looking at the time-lapse, I was about to start constructing it, and I would have eased into that segue perfectly. But hey, we can talk about the actual engines themselves. We've got the propeller blades attached to the electric motors. Of course, again, the motors are going to be the electric type so that they can be powered by the batteries, enabling this thing to have infinite range. And now we've begun construction of the interplanetary stage, I can continue with the tangent I was about to start upon. That was, unlike our previous trips to Laythe, our interplanetary stage isn't going to be powered by nuclear engines. Instead, if I place it in just a second, we're going to have Oh, I'm placing an adapter piece here. I'm really trying to synchronize this. There we go. I'm going with the... Oh, it's gone, but it'll come back, I promise you. This is going to be powered by the Wolfhound engine. There were a few reasons I went for the Wolfhound. Firstly, our payload is much lighter than our previous two Laythe crafts, so it's much easier to make a high delta V transfer vehicle for it. The second reason is the fact that the Wolfhound has much higher thrust to weight ratio than the nuclear engines, meaning that we only need one of them, which is good because we have a very asymmetrically weighted payload, so we need to offset our engine's center of thrust to fire along the vehicle's center of mass, which isn't central. A process made easier when we only have one engine's placement to worry about. This brings me to the third benefit of the Wolfhound. Even if I don't manage to get the engine's placement exactly in line with the craft's center of mass, the Wolfhound has thrust vectoring, unlike the nuclear engines, which means that the engine can gimbal its nozzle's orientation to counteract any issues with payload mass imbalance. And as you can see, I've pretty much done constructing the actual main rocket as well. We've got that cartoonishly large fairing piece just there, just because we've got lots of wings and control surfaces at the top of the rocket, which is really, I went a bit American just then for some reason, which is really just a recipe for having a rocket that's going to flip over as soon as you try and launch it. So I just covered it in a fairing to make sure this thing would remain as stable as possible during flight. And now we've faded across to the launch platform. We can just get ready to launch. We can throttle up those engines. There they are staged. Firing up the throttle, and then as we reach our maximum power, we're going to press stage again to decouple those launch clamps, and we can begin our ascension into the air, as opposed to the ground, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to now play the footage in slightly sped up mode because there's not much to talk about with the actual ascent of this thing. It's a fairly standard Kerbal Space Program gravity turn where you just gradually tip over to 45 degrees by about the time you reach 100 kilometers. Wait, no, 10 kilometers. Getting a bit ahead of myself. We're not quite there yet. When you reach 10 kilometers, and then from there we just very, very slowly tip over to be pointing flat, wanting to make sure that you keep an eye on both your time to apoapsis and your altitude. You don't want to point flat too soon because then you'll spend ages just fighting the air resistance and wasting a bunch of fuel. So just trying to get the tip from 45 to flat as slow as possible. My goodness, I really need to slow down and think about what I'm trying to say before I, say it. Anyway, there goes the stage. You can see I had those little Separatron boosters just there to separate it. Not that they were particularly necessary because the actual shroud piece that contains the Rhino engine doesn't have any collision physics, but I don't know, it just looks cool. It just looks so cool, doesn't it? When you've got the lower stage just get pulled away by the SRBs, and it is a bit more realistic. A lot of real-life rockets will have, well, at least I think the Saturn V. This is now me not researching my point before I say it and getting it all horribly wrong, and someone corrects me in the comments, but I feel like at some point I read that the Saturn V, the stages were pulled apart by SRBs. This ain't Scott Manley. I don't do research of space. Oh, God, no, actually, I've set a bad precedent because now I do a space news series. So, don't know. I'm now frozen in terror. Do I now pause my commentary and go and Google this? Or do I just continue and we just pretend that this whole tangent never took place? I think I'm going to go with the latter. The irony of that statement being that I did actually just pause my commentary just then because I kind of needed the toilet, and then I decided to get a glass of water, and I just turned the oven on to be the right temperature so I can cook my food later. I did a few odd bits and bobs, and I sat back down and pressed, and now I'm sitting here and I'm like, I could have Googled that and verified my claim, but what are you going to do? 2020, innit? There's no real expectations here, is there? So now we're going to move along. I'm going to start my interplanetary burn, which we're going to do in 2 stages like we've done in the other episodes of Live On Laythe thus far. Unlike previous episodes, we're only going to do 2. Again, we have much higher thrust-to-weight ratio. Now we have a Wolfhound powering us, and again, we've got a much lighter payload than we have had in previous episodes. So we're going to do 1 burn just to get us to right up to the edge of Kerbin's sphere of influence. The reason for this is that means that we can then stage those side tanks just there and allow them to fall back to Kerbin and burn up in the atmosphere. We're not going to do that, of course, before we lower our periapsis once we're at our apoapsis point so that it passes into the atmosphere again. And this is just a little way we can add a bit of extra delta V by just having a small stage. Usually these big interplanetary stages like this, I try and incorporate into just one monolithic spacecraft that doesn't drop tanks along the way because I don't like leaving space debris in space. That was a very good sentence just there. But I take opportunities like this where we can drop some tanks free and let them crash back to Kerbin and don't leave space cluttered. And as you can see, you may have noticed, here I was encountering the infamous fuel transfer glitch. I realized that the actual fuel tanks that form the structure of the engine mounts just there on the wings were empty. And I was like, I could actually transfer some fuel from these tanks into those before we stage them so that we have a little bit of extra Delta V in the rest of the rocket. But I just couldn't get the fuel to transfer. Like, I was right-clicking the fuel tanks and pressing transfer and nothing was happening. And I don't know why this was how it was. I remember mentioning encountering this glitch in a previous video, and loads of people said that yes, this is a very well-known thing. It happens to me. It's really annoying. And I'm like, right, well, you guys saw how much fuel was in those tanks. You saw I wasn't able to get the fuel transferred into those completely. So I thought at this point, I have done everything that is required of me. It is just the game now deciding that it doesn't want to play ball. So I felt completely justified in just filling up the tanks using hyperedit once we staged those ones, because if the game hadn't glitched, we would have had that fuel, and spoiler alert, we don't even use the Delta V that I gained from that fuel transfer anyway, or, you know, that I would have gained from the fuel transfer if it had worked. So it's all swings and roundabouts, really. Moving swiftly on, we can now get around to performing our second burn at Kerbin periapsis. You know, it's always good to try and spend as much time burning at periapsis as possible, because as all viewers of this channel should do at this point, burning at periapsis is the most efficient place to burn for burns such as this, as in pro-grade burns. Inclination changes not so much, but pro-grade burns at least, it is the most efficient place to perform that burn, as stated by the O-berth effect. But hey, if you're not a regular viewer of this channel and you like this video so far somehow, then why not consider hitting the subscribe button down below? I recently read an article that revealed just how much of a difference it makes when YouTubers say, please subscribe and please like. I thought like, oh, it makes a bit of a difference, and you know, it's fun to say, but it is not. It is huge. It is monumental. I was like, oh my god, this is colossal. So now I like kind of feel obligated to say it, like, oh, please like this video and please subscribe. But also, like, I try and, I don't know, it's really awkward. I've always not been very good. Oh, by the way, here we are encountering the transfer glitch again. Like, I don't get it. What really frustrates me is I can't figure out what is happening in the game's code that forbids the fuel transfer, because I'm no coder. I don't know how to program, but I understand the fundamentals of it, like, you know, how coding works. Like when I was younger, I made like batch files in Notepad, you know, like programming. Like, I know the basics. And I just can't for the life of me figure out what is happening in the game's code that allows me to transfer fuel between some fuel tanks, but not other fuel tanks. Like just then, I was able to transfer the fuel tanks. I'm getting a bit excited now, guys. I was able to transfer the fuel from those engine tanks into some of the main interplanetary transfer stage tanks, but not others. And I don't know why. What's happening in the game's code? Squad, please, if you're watching this video, please, can you just fix it? It would be good. So I was going to say, please, can you give me an answer? But really, I don't care what the answer is. I just kind of want it to be gone, because this is a really recent glitch. Like, it never used to be in the game, and then like, I don't know, 1.10 seemed to add it, and I don't know. I mean, what was 1.10 again? Was it like the ESA update, wasn't it? And they added comets. What? So really, we've got. Is it the ESA, Squad? Is it the ESA? Guys, it's the European Space Agency's fault, I think. That's. I mean, like, in a weird roundabout way, it kind of is. Don't know what else. I don't know what else to say about this topic, really. I mean, like, clearly the video has moved on from this topic, but I have not. So let's just press on regardless. As you can see, we are performing our standard Tylo gravity assist. I feel like at this point, I do worry about rehashing the same points again and again. So I won't talk about how to do the Tylo gravity assist again. But if you'd like to learn how to do Tylo gravity assists, now I say that, I realize I haven't actually given an explanation in any of the Life on Laythe videos, because I just say, just play around with maneuver nodes, get an encounter with Tylo, and you can just experiment with the maneuver node maker and see how Tylo's gravity influences your orbit around Joule, and by doing so, you can get a nice Joule capture for free. I don't know. I feel like the quality of this commentary is at odds with the quality I strive for the rest of Life on Laythe, but I don't know. This is my third week of doing a Laythe mission, and for me, it's like I'm trying to think of creative ways, of creative things to talk about, interesting topics that are relevant to the video, but I also don't want the video to sound too tired, and by this point, week 3, it's basically the same mission. It's just sending something to Laythe. And I feel like if I just talk about the same things again and again, it's going to turn people off and make them not want to like this video. But you will obey me and like the video. So I'm really sorry. Like I say, I struggle with the whole self-promotion thing. Like some of you might be watching my Space This Week series. It's doing really well on this channel, actually, much better than Planning Coaster does. But in that series, I am trying to say I'm going for a more broadcasty feel. Like I feel like the Kerbal Space Program videos, it's more like me just talking to you. It's a conversation. It's content creator, content consumer. It's a bit more of a conversational tone. But that video, because it's like a news broadcast, that's it. I'm trying to make it more broadcasty. Like just. Yeah, I'm trying to still maintain the levity that I feel like my viewers are used to, but at the same time, I am trying to make it a bit more formal, like, this is what's happening, and so in that sense, I am trying to do the self-promo thing, because, yeah, it turns out that actually it's really, really important that YouTubers do self-promote and ask for the likes and subscriptions, because, my goodness, it is crazy the difference it makes. Like, what was it, 5 to 6 times more likes and subscriptions if you just ask for it? So, I mean, guys, I've got merchandise to sell, so, I'm only human. What can you what can I say? What can I say? And there goes all the there go the dislikes right there, probably. Let's talk about the footage and move on from whatever that was. Here I am, captured at Laythe. Oh dear. I mean, I had like loads of... I had a bullet point. I've got it in front of me. I'm holding it. Well, no, I'm not holding it, but I put it down because I was tired of holding it. But I put it down on the desk and I can still see it. Just some bullet points that I felt I needed to talk about. And I'm still on vehicle assembly building bullet points, why I picked Wolfhound engines. And then I just sort of tangented from there. And that's definitely a noun. Or a verb, even, that I'm now going on. I mean, what did I need to talk about? Oh, yes. For anyone wondering why it was so easy for me to get a dual encounter from low Kerbin orbit, it's because it's launched at a Joule transfer window, which is where if you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Joule, the angle that line forms at the sun should be about 100 degrees. That's that. And you know what? Let's just move on. Let's just move on. And we've accepted now, all of us together as a family that like each other's videos have accepted that we have moved on, and now we have entered Laythe's atmosphere, and so we can get ready to perform our landing. Now, I didn't want to take any chances messing around with my capabilities as a VTOL pilot, and I thought, let's just play it safe. Let's not try and do some fancy vertical landing on our initial Laythe descent. Let's just try and land this like a conventional aircraft, just to ensure that, the landing definitely succeeds. And also because I guess it's one way of showcasing to you guys that this thing can land like a normal airplane. I'd like to be able to at least showcase that ability once in this video, so that's what we're going to do on our initial descent. Now, in terms of where I wanted to take this aircraft, I wanted to, first of all, just land it somewhere, just to prove that it could land like an aircraft and, make sure it could touch down on Laythe safely, so I could do a quick save. And then I wanted to go and investigate a small island that I saw not too far away from our splashed down ocean base, because I thought that island looked like quite a good spot to establish a surface colony in an upcoming video, and we'll get to those reasons when we get there. And then I want to take this to the splashed down ocean base itself, just so we can pay a little visit to the crew, bring them some presents. We brought them some champagne, and they can have a little chit-chat, I guess, the Kerbals, and have a little reunion. So that's what we're going to be doing in the next part of this video. Now, I get that many of you are here for Kerbal Space Program content, and the key part of that sentence is space, and we've pretty much done the transportation of this craft from Kerbin to Laythe. So the rest of the video is going to be me flying around. If that's not your sort of thing, then no need to watch the rest of this video. Thank you for sticking around. Hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, as you can see, we have now successfully touched down, and you can notice actually deploying the wings into their vertical position acts as a really good air brake to slow down more effectively than, just relying on the brakes on the landing gear. Anyway, now that we have touched down, let us waste no time in getting this thing into a vertical takeoff orientation. So you might notice that little propeller blade S window I had open. For vertical takeoff, the deploy limit of those blades needs to be about 7 degrees. And I've actually got the action group set up so that J and L allow you to change the deploy angle using keyboard controls rather than having to manipulate that slider. Now, once we start moving forward, this thing does have a tendency to drop in altitude a bit, so I like to make sure I get to a nice, safe height above the terrain before attempting to switch this thing into a horizontal flight configuration. So usually 200 meters above the surface is a pretty safe bet. I am going a little bit higher in this instance because I want to head towards the ocean base, which I'm now moving the camera around just to showcase the aircraft in flight, but that was at the worst possible time. There it is, you can see it again. Just underneath Jewel in the distance, you can see that yellow square. That's where we want to go, and there is a bit of a ridge in the way. So I wanted to get extra high to make sure we wouldn't crash into it, because once we initiate horizontal flight by pressing action group 4, the aircraft will start dropping a little bit in altitude, and it's at this point you want to start increasing the deploy angle of those blades. Initially, I find around 21 degrees is a good deploy angle to initiate some forward momentum, and then once your craft starts moving forward, then increasing the deploy angle to about 31 degrees seems to be a good balance for getting some nice acceleration. And as you can see, we are now in stable horizontal flight. Then once stable horizontal flight is established, I tend to just increase the deploy angle to basically get a higher speed. So in this case, I'm at 41 degrees. On Kerbin, flying at Kerbin, I guess the atmospheric density is different, but I found flight at Kerbin, 51 degrees, was a bit better for fast flight. So your mileage might vary. For when you're in horizontal flight, just keep pressing L to increase the deploy angle of those blades. And once you stop accelerating or start decelerating, then just go back a bit with J, and that's the deploy angle to use, effectively. Just play around with it. I didn't really know what I was doing the first time I flew this, and I had no idea which deploy angle to set at which moment, so I kind of just had to figure it out myself. So I would recommend just doing the same if you try this craft as well, or if you design a craft in a similar fashion to this one. What I might be saying, it might not be very good advice. There might be better deploy angle configurations to use. If I really wanted to be smart about this thing's design, I probably could have set up a CAL control unit on this thing, so just automatically set the deploy angle for the blades during specific maneuvers, but I really couldn't be bothered, and this setup works well enough. Anyway, here is a little UI-less shot showcasing this aircraft, and now we're in the air. This is as good a time as any to perform some science experiments. So yeah, the gravity experiment and the seismometer obviously won't work in the air, but we can do the other things. So we've got the science unit in the back, and we've got the mystery goo unit, we've got the temperature and the atmospheric sensors as well. So we've got those all run. We can do a nice Doppler effect camera using the camera tools mod. And there, underneath our aircraft, you could see that little island just there. That's what I'm aiming for. That's the island that I would like to establish a ground base on, because it's nice and close to the ocean base, and I kind of want the two bases, as in, the land base and the ocean base, to be fairly close to each other, because as you can see, this aircraft does not go anywhere fast, and I'd like to minimize the commute as much as possible between the two bases. Anyway, it's now time to see if this island really is a good candidate. So I've got aerodynamic forces just there, so you can kind of see what's happening. I'm first of all slowing ourselves down horizontally by raising the wing into its vertical orientation. It's important to remember that when you're switching from horizontal to vertical, before you press action group 4 to toggle the hinge, you also press action group 1 to just undock that anterior docking port on the wing. Now I'm not flying particularly safely. I'm just trying to descend as quickly as possible. I have also set the deploy angle of those blades to 7 degrees again, which is what I found through my experimentation is the optimal deploy angle for vertical takeoff and landing. And then we're just being incredibly gentle with Q and E to try and get this thing to touch down flat. As you can see, I'm not the best helicopter pilot. I haven't flown many VTOLs in this game, and it probably shows. I'm not the most confident pilot when it comes to landing. So I have got the landing gear deployed just to make sure that I have some, I have a part with a fairly high crash tolerance if I don't get it very gentle. And, oh, yes, I think the Kerbals might be feeling a bit nauseous. And, oh, a textbook landing, ladies and gentlemen. Do not worry, that's not going to be the only vertical landing that I do in this video, and I do get better with practice. I don't think I've ever landed this thing vertically more than like once or twice before I filmed this video, so I will get some more experience as this goes on, and hopefully subsequent vertical landings will be better. Well, I already know they are better, so worry not, dear viewers. Anyway, now it's time to deploy some more science experiments. Now we can run the seismometer and the gravioli, and also we can take the data from the science experiments that we've already run. Now I've got that little ladder just there so the Kerbals can safely cross the science bay without accidentally damaging any sensitive equipment. We'll also restore the single-use experiments, and then we can retract that ladder, and I've got that little robot hinge there. So we can deploy that scanning unit. What's it called again? The narrowband scanner. Oh, that looks so cool. I was really proud of that. Like, it's a completely unnecessary piece of equipment for this particular craft, but it just looks so cool. And I couldn't resist, guys. I couldn't resist incorporating it into that science bay just there. And then we can, take the data from the other experiments, I guess, that I haven't taken the data from already. And now we can just test out a feature that some of you might have thought was missing. And that is, we've got no ladder to get from the surface back to the cockpit. But worry not, dear viewer. As you can see, Kerbals are quite the apt climbers. They can just scramble up the side, no problems. And then to board the science lab, we only need to raise the wings up to expose that hatch. And then, I guess there's nothing more to do other than just take flight once again. So, Action Group 1 to undock the hinge. Action Group 4 to raise the wings. Then I enabled time warp just so we can recharge the batteries. And then off we go. Now, I'm not going to enable horizontal flight in this instance. I'm just surveying the land to see just how flat this island is. One of the tricky things of colonizing Laythe, or at least, the lands of Laythe, is the fact that the islands of Laythe are quite hilly and mountainous, save for the South Pole. I didn't really fancy establishing a base on the poles. Save for the poles, everything is quite hilly, but I thought this island looked particularly flat for Laythe, so I thought this would be a good spot to establish a base. And also, it's another advantage of having it being really flat is the fact that it's a good spot for conventional aircraft that aren't capable of VTOL landings to safely land. Whilst it's possible to land aircraft on mountainous terrain in this game, it's much more difficult, and realistically, well, that's just it, isn't it? It's not very realistic. So I thought this island would be a very good candidate, and to be honest, my little survey of the land just here was pretty promising. I was like, yes, this looks like a good spot for a little ground base. So that's going to be coming in a future episode, guys. Possibly next week. I haven't decided yet, but it's definitely a step that we need to do soon. I mean, it'll either be next week or at least the next episode of Life on Laythe, or we might need to establish a science network. We'll have to analyze the data that we acquire from this mission after the fact. As you can see, it is still very much underway. So here we are. Second attempt at landing vertically, and as you can see, bit of a wobble, but hey, definitely an improvement over the last one. Obviously, our most dangerous vertical landing is going to be vertical landing in the water, which we haven't done just yet. And now we can plant our flag. And you know what? I'm establishing this. This is Lowne Island. There's no, biome for this island, and I don't think it's got an official name. So this is it. This is canon. This is Lowne Island, and it's going to be Lowne Aerospace's little ground base location. Now, panicked a bit there because the little F to climb thing wasn't popping up, but fear not, we managed to do it in the end. And I guess actually that's it. Now we can go and visit the ocean base. So once again, we're going to fire up those rotors. Of course, make sure your torque limit is set to 100. Well, I guess it can be anything above 0, but there's no reason to not set it to 100. Oh, we're going to do a quick time warp as well to make sure our batteries are fully charged, because we've got just over 10 kilometers of distance to cover. We're then going to fire up those rotors and ascend to a relatively safe altitude, which, as I said earlier, I usually try and aim for 200 meters above the surface. And then I guess I sometimes find that increasing from 7 to 9 once you've gained a sufficient altitude just helps to make sure you continue ascending at a reasonable speed. And then now we've established, wow, I'm really going conservative, aren't I? I feel like I've done tests and 200 was safe, but we're now about to put that to the test, aren't we? So I've changed the deploy angle to 21, and hey, we never went past the 100-meter mark. So 200 would, in fact, have been a safe distance. I guess I just wanted to make sure we would be I wanted to make doubly sure that we would be okay. And now we've established stable flight. I've increased the deploy angle to around 41 degrees to maintain a fairly fast speed, over 160 meters per second. I'd say that's pretty swift for a propeller aircraft of this nature. Now, as you can see, the ocean base, we're rapidly approaching it. So, actually, first of all, I'm going to quickly pause the game and do some nice freeze-frame cinematic panoramas just to showcase. I think I was just fishing for thumbnail shots at this point. Anyway, we can now zoom back in and resume our flight. As I was saying, we are rapidly approaching the ocean base, which means we're going to be thinking about doing our landing in the water very soon. Now, landing in the water is one of the more dangerous things to do in this craft, just because it's quite tricky to land in water anyway. But I feel like I don't know if this might just be me misperceiving things, but I feel like the crash tolerance of that laboratory is nowhere near as good as it used to be, because you can touch down super slowly on the water in this thing and the lab will just blow up. I don't think I've ever managed to... No, I have. I've successfully managed to land this thing in water horizontally, like a normal aircraft, once. Every other attempt, the lab would just get destroyed. And, vertically landing it, while certainly much easier, you still have to go very, very, very slowly as you do your touchdown in order to ensure that that lab doesn't get destroyed. Now, I've made floating bases like this in the past, and I've never had this issue before, so I feel like perhaps the lab has had some sort of nerf to its crash tolerance, but I'm really not sure. I haven't looked this up. But just as a word of warning, basically, to anyone attempting to fly this plane, be very mindful of the crash tolerance of that laboratory. It's not very good. Anyway, here's the big moment. Can Matt touch down safely? Yes, I can. Come on, guys. That was a pretty good landing, right? I mean, that's definitely the best vertical landing I've done thus far, and it will be the best one I do in this video, because that's all the flight we're going to be doing in this video. Now we just need to taxi over to the ocean base, and I find setting the target angle of that alligator hinge to 45 degrees is the best setting for traversing the water. Flying flat means that those blades hit the surface of the water, and it often results in their destruction. So 45 degrees, I think, is the best compromise between keeping the blades above the waterline, but also still providing enough thrust to move us forward. And there we are. Well, it was shot a little bit, but we can... I don't have an action group for this, so I have to zoom into the craft to try and select that alligator hinge. But there we are. And then we can just coast forward again. And yes, I mean, if you guys haven't seen the previous episode of Life on Laythe and would like to see the construction and, journey that this submersible base has taken, and indeed, want to see it actually submerge and go to the very bottom of Laythe's ocean, then there's a link to the full Life on Laythe playlist at the end of this video, and hopefully I remember to put a link on screen to the specific video for that ocean base, when I started talking about this, so it might still be there. I still can't really figure out how YouTube cards work. Anyway, I was basically stalling for time whilst I waited for this moment when we got our pilot on an EVA. As you can go for a little dip in the kilometer deep oceans. I know how deep this ocean is because, well, I won't spoil the exact depth in case you've not seen the video. How's that for a self-promo moment? You can see I'm kind of wrapping this episode up, right, guys? I really hope you enjoyed this craft. Oh yeah, actually I can showcase the fact that Kerbals can still get on board the craft now that they can't scramble aboard those float tanks just there, because of course we have that ladder that is just the right level for Kerbals to access from the water. And that's the full showcase of this VTOL, and I think it makes a marvelous addition to our current Laythe colonization efforts. But let me know your thoughts, and if you would like to download this craft for yourself, there is a link to the craft file in the video description. I feel like that's everything I needed to say, so we can zoom out and go to an end screen. The left-hand side panel is a link to the full Life on Laythe playlist. The right-hand panel is a video chosen for you by YouTube's recommendation algorithm based on your viewing habits, so hopefully it's a good choice. There's also links to merchandise, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff in the description. Guys, again, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I do hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.